E ko tae o nuku, e ko tae o rangi, tēnei au, tēnei au, tēnei au, wakarongo mai, wakarongo mai, wakarongo mai rā, e te toi hau o nā rangi. Te toi ariki, te toi uru tapu, te toi uru rangi, te toi uru roa, wakatauha, wakatauha. Tai mai te koroa ato ai ki te matau o te wenoa, kia pā mai hoki tō aroa, me tō rai ki tō ungarawa kore. Tau awatia te matapore hu e koe waka ora anotia te tūro e tō wairua tapu. Ara hina mai mātou ki te ara tika ki a wakatini, wakatinana hoki i tau e wiri nei mō mātou. Waka oho mai mātou ki tō tāwara mārere ki a manatu hoki ki o kupu, ki a mohi o pū, he ara tapu te ara ihu, he wāhi tapu hoki tōna ara, ai nei, ake nei, ai.
Ko te mea totahi mi atu ki a koe rā jai. Ka whakatū ere ia te tatau mo tātai mo tēnei pōnei i tēnei wānanga. E wānanga ni ana tātou roto i te whakaaroha nui e katoa. He mihi kaua te kia koutou e te rōpu te aiotanga o Haukura. E whakatū mai i roto i tēnei ware nei, te whare ununga. E waia te ngi ana ki a mere, ko nāna te waene o tātou ara ka puta mai a ihu karaiti nei o tātou. Hoino, e te ware, e te ununga, e me i atu ki a koera. Kia whakaono ti ana mātou i tēnei pōnei. Aha koa, ka tū mai e me i atu, e pāne ki te hapu o Ngāti Uti. Ko te here kawe te awa nei e rere atu ki Tangaroa. Ara, ka taino ki Pauakai. Ara, e ki te au te awa roroa, he nunui te awa o Waikai o. Pērai ai te awa nei e whakarere hoki rā ki te moana nui a kiwa, aha koa ka tainoa na rātou mā hei te wānei, i te wānei hoki rā a rātou ngā tupuna i taimai. Hoi no, kei wainge nui i e nā awa nei, kei konei mātou, ka tū ahau. Me e ti hatu ngā meme o te hapu nei o Ngāti Uti, i wakatau ane kia koutou, i tēnei pōnei. Kia koutou nei, te kaonganatanga nei, e te pāti reipa, e te pāti kia koe rahuki e te minita nei, te tokorua nei, ka tainoa ki tō tātou nei, tuahine nei, no ngā te runui. Pēnei ai ka mii kaua kia koe rā, E no o mai ke wanguni mātou i ta apu nā tu witi. Pēnei ai e kite ana tō pānui tia, pānui ki te ao, e pāne ki tō tātou nei reo rangatira hoki. I kawati kia koe rā, i tatu mai nei ke wanguni mātou, ke kuneina a tia tia o hoki. Ka whakahono tia 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 o kia koe Ngāti Rui ngā rue hini, ara, e hono tia ana kia tātou. Tēnei te me i kia koe rā Ngāti Witi wakatau mai rā. Hoi no kia koe rā i te waka. He mihi ate kia koe e te kūtiro. I awa wā he kei konei nā koe rā, ka puta mai he pua wai koe, he puti puti, he rangatira. Ka whai ti ana kia rātou a kui mā koroma i tō kui kuia. Ara me tō whai ne hoki me tō matua. He kaupapa whakanui ai tēnei pōnei au e nā wiki e pahuri ake. Te nuinga ngā pāketanga i tatu mai ke te wakaronga mai ake i te ngā kupu kōrero. Hoi no, tēnā koe, ki taino kia koe jai, kōru nei e a kia koutou katoa he whakarite mai ana tēnei hui hui nei. Koutou katoa, nā mihi kia koutou. E pāne ki ta hapu nei, he mihi kawati ki tō tātou nei rangatira a Greg Keenan. I mati ana i te rāwiki. He rangatira o te hapu o Ngāti Witi. He i kawati ki ta wānau Keenan nei. Nāna te kai whakaero, he tangata kai whakaero. I awa wā nei, ko ngā whare katoa o Aotearoa, nāna i whakaero e rā whare katoa. He i kawati ki aia, i tana mai, ara e takoto mai nei, te marae o mana ariki. Hoi no koutou katoa i tēnei pōnei, nei rā te mii kia koutou katoa i tai mai ana, he wakarongo mai ana, he hono ti ana, o roto i te whare hononga. Nō reira tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Tika tau ngā kōru i tōku oranga e pā ki te rongaroa. Hei manaki, hei tiaki kia tātou i tēnei pōnei, o whare nei o tātou. Ko te humare me te rongo mau ki wainguri i tātou i tēnei pōnei, ko kuta rā, anei rā, Ngāti Witi, e me i kawati kia koutou i tēnei pō, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. In summary, have a great night. Lovely here.
Ki tau, taranga Māori e kia koutou, peace be with you. My name is Dan, I am Reverend Dan, I'm your favourite Anglican priest. If you weren't aware, it was actually Buy Your Priest a Beer Day on Saturday. I'm still waiting. I sit in the office over there. Come find me. Welcome to week 4. It is awesome to be here. And in addition to being your favourite Anglican priest, I am also your favourite health and safety officer. So as we always do, let me just read these out because keeping you all safe is important. So, if you see a fire and or some other sort of emergency, please notify one of the cathedral team. Cathedral team, could you just give us a wave wherever you may be? There we go, up the back, there's some over here. Hi Viz, we'll make ourselves known to you as well. So in the event of a fire, an alarm will sound and the wardens in their high-vis vests will guide you. Our exits are out through this main door here, and then we have another exit through here and through another door and out the back. Our gathering point in the event of a fire or a emergency of some description is just up on the grass up the back there. So just head out in an orderly fashion along the road and then just up onto the grassed area. Toilets in the vicarage, so just out this door and into the back of the vicarage, which is this big building here, you'll find toilets, so they are there. And I think that is about it from me. No. What else was there? Was there anything about books?
Oh, yeah, or koha, eh? People want to give a koha?
So this is a free event, but if you do want to offer a koha just to help us cover our costs here, that would be awesome. You can either do that via cash at the back, or we've got a FPOS machine. What's that? Or there's a QR code. We're getting flash here at the Anglican Church. There's a QR code on the back of the little flyer that was on your seat. So you can scan that, and that'll shoot you through to a website where you can also give a koha. There is also copies of Jay's book up the back there as well, which are available to purchase. And they summarise a lot of Jay's kōrero from the first 2 weeks of our time together. Otherwise, sit back and we'll get into it.
Well, tēnā tātou, ka nuta mihi kia koutou, nau mai ki te wari ononga, nau mai ki te wiki o te reo Māori. Nō reira, kia ora mates. Kia ora. It's a privilege to have you all here. Thank you so much for everyone who has come out these last 4 weeks. They have been incredible evenings, and everyone has just participated incredibly well. Lots of questions. Lots of questions aren't answered, so what I intend to do is to go back and answer those questions over Facebook as the weeks come over, go on. But just a reminder, this is our 4th night. We've had 3 good weeks. But just in case someone's still zizzing on the inside, just remember our tikanga for these hui, for the super awesome origin story of co-governance hui. Just remember our questions are via text. And just to reiterate once again, they are via text so that you can ask a really clear and concise question and not waffle like me. And it's also so that it's not, these evenings are not an opportunity to kōrero from the floor, but to listen to the speakers from up the front, but to ask questions. So we've already had questions come in tonight already. So please, if you'd like to answer some questions to our guest panel tonight, please do so. If you can't follow that, and if you feel like you've just got to throw a bit of a kōrero out to us all. That is kind of like, hey, mate, not sure if that's the right time for this. I am going to say parau ko tūko. And if I say stand up here and say parau ko tūko, then we will all stand up and we will be silent for 1 minute. At the end of that minute, I will say parau ko tūko anō. I'll say it again. And then I will ask us all, hey whānau, are we to carry on? And if we all collectively agree that it's okay for us, then we will sit down and we will carry on. If the speaker hasn't sat down by that time, there is a group here who have the constable on speed dial, just across the road. Because the other fella couldn't come tonight because he's a bit mawiwi, but we've got the number. True story. But just so we know, but look, this is the last night. We've had an awesome month of wānanga. I think it's appropriate too for a couple of reasons. One, we had our maunga settlement the other week. Te Ruruku Putakirongo, tohu about what is happening in our whenua. On that day, I could not help but think of the number 405, and the number of our men that were taken in prison down the South Island for making a stand. And I can't help but think that we are alive to witness what they longed for to some degree. I did not know what our tiro were going to sing tonight, but the fact that they started off with Kia Māria, tomorrow morning we start the strengthening on Meritapu. At 7:30 tomorrow morning we do karakia and we start the strengthening there. We are going to test 10 metres of that wall to get an actual cost. It's going to take us about 6 months of strengthening 10 metres of the south wall, and based on that we will be able to know if yes, we have the finances to be able to strengthen that old ware, or we'll go, you know what, I think it's too much money to strengthen that, and I don't know if it's just to do that. But when I say I, not me, but the team, right? But that's the process that we're in right now. And we'll look at, but that starts tomorrow morning. So, kei te pai. So last week it was a privilege to hear from some amazing speakers about the journey in local government politics and what has happened with our Māori ward here in Ngā Motu, New Plymouth. It was an amazing evening. Tonight, on our final night, we want to. I've invited a couple of politicians who are standing in the rohe for them to share on their understanding of co-governance. Now, they might be for it, they might not be for it, I don't know. But I've asked them to come and share. I have also asked them very specifically, this is not a political debate. We are not here to debate policies or whatever tonight. What we are here to do is this. Te Tiriti is a real living document. It is speaking to every generation and will always forever speak to every generation of people. What that means is that it is up to us in every generation to understand what our forebears how they've understood it, and then for us to take that into our kete and then reimagine what it means for our tamariki mokopuna, for our children and our grandchildren as we move forward century. And so today is about having a kōrero about that. What does that mean as our leaders stand up and want to represent us for national politics story? First off tonight, he drew the short straw by the fact that his last name starts with a B, so we're going by alphabetical order. We're going to, so we have Mr. Honourable Glenn Bennett come and share, but let me just read a little, no, I've got to do this, bro. Glenn has worked across social and business enterprise, restorative justice, community development and youth support, and helped the region create a plan for its future as a facilitator of Taranaki 2050 workshops. Glenn is a trained celebrant and in 2016 was one of the organisers of the Peace Hikoi to Parihaka, which is where I met him, and been involved in the Just Transition conversation. Glenn has been a long-term advocate and community champion for the New Plymouth suburb of Marfell and its residents, as well as a lifelong foster parent. He has now seen the positive impact this has made on the next generation of foster children and accounts this as one of his successes. Nō reira e ho nau mai i te pōnei. Welcome, Glenn. Just for our speakers, you've got to speak into this, by the way, because there's people in the vicarage. They won't hear you unless you speak into this.
He's going to walk and rant.
And yeah, you've got to stick behind the podium. Okay. So.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Ko Glenn Bennett, tōku ingoa. Just Glenn, yeah. Introductions are introductions, right? Now for me, in thinking as a politician, but trying desperately not to be political, although everything is political, let's be frank, I've been reflecting in the last year or so about how do we as a region be brave and curious, not fearful and suspicious. And I believe that by you being here this evening, this month, you are people who want to be brave and curious about what is possible, not suspicious and fearful, which often has been the case, particularly in politics and particularly in our communities. I want to see our region caring deeply for our people and our place, for everyone, for all people in their place. I want to introduce to you an anonymous person this evening. We'll just refer to him, we'll give him a name. Glenn, let's just use Glenn. Now, Glenn grew up in a time and a place with a Pākehā family in a Pākehā world. This young man grew up, although in a world where he interfaced and had moments of connection with non-Pākehā and in the Māori world. This young man has a story to tell, and his story is different to this young man. And we'll just give him a name randomly. Let's just call him John. And John grew up in quite a different world and a different experience to Glenn. His whānau, his whakapapa, his experiences of what he had and what he didn't have were very different to the experiences that Glenn had. So imagine those two coming together. Imagine those stories. Imagine partnership. Imagine relationship. Imagine te tiriti. And that's my relationship with my husband, John. And I believe that if anything is a te tiriti relationship, it is us. And we laugh. I am a representative of the Crown. I am a member of Parliament. I am one of those people that has been a representative of the oppressor, of those who are away. But also in this relationship, it's around finding what co-governance, what relationship, let's just call it friendship, shall we? What friendship is all about. And friendship is the coming together. Friendship is about coming together of all people in our community to celebrate life, to mourn death, to work together in partnership for the betterment not only of me, but of John and of everyone else. Now, this partnership is simple. It's two people coming together. And the korowai you see being worn in this photo is the same korowai worn in the previous photo. And although I did not make this korowai, although my ancestors were not part of that, that is my korowai. That is part of who I am and my whakapapa, now being intertwined with the life of John. They're wrapped tightly entwined together, reminding me that life is more than just me, more than just my two parents and two brothers, but it is my ancestors, John's ancestors, us working together. Now, this partnership conversation and what it's about goes back a few years. And for me, the joy and the challenge of being a foster parent, with all its beauty, and of course, I'm only putting up the beautiful photos, but it's also the story challenge. And I've seen the breakdown of our system firsthand. I've seen the breakdown of our system in my own home. I've seen the intergenerational trauma that has come. And I hear the stories of pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Come on, people, we've got this. It's kind of hard when your boots were taken from you a long, long time ago. And for me, what this friendship looks like, it looks like a life committed to my community. It's a life committed to changing the system. And I think when I look at these young men, and this is a few years ago, they're even more charming now, I think about the chances that they never had, that I had. I think about the historic trauma that was their unwelcome friend, of the system that wasn't responsive to their needs, to their culture, to who they were. And I think about it being me, not there to fix them, but me to walk alongside and to find liberation together. I want to use this photo just because I look way slimmer and younger, but anyway. And for me, and more hair, thank you, less grey, all that kind of stuff, thank you very much. Can everyone stand up for 1 minute? Is that? Oh, no. For me, it is intergenerational. And how do we walk alongside each other together? And it's not easy. It's not an overnight fix to find a way forward together. Now, I want to come... Oh yeah, that's just a nice photo, I think. There was a really good reason for that. It was really symbolic earlier, but I forgot. But they're the same people, actually, so that's why. Now, for those of you who have been part of the Māori Ward conversation, those who've championed and fought hard and had the t-shirts to prove it, we had a campaign a few years earlier, which was a bit cheaper, bit of photocopying and some kebab sticks. But we championed the council back in the early 2010s around Māori Ward. Unity is plural, a minimum of 2, right? We thought we were really smart, but they wouldn't let us have them in the debating chamber in council because you're not allowed to have anything like that. But anyway, this was the night, ladies and gentlemen. This was the night that we celebrated. This was the night that we voted, the councillors voted, and a Māori Ward was established here in New Plymouth. It was bliss. We had kebabs on Devon Street. I spared no, it was Coca-Cola. And of course then that was overturned. That was voted out by a referendum of the people. And so we walked. And so we had a conversation. And as we planned and worked for the peace walk to Pariaka, it was about walking into a new conversation. And I want to thank Jay, I want to thank Dan, I want to thank Ngāti Te Whiti, I want to thank those who are walking into that new conversation in these spaces, in this place, and over the last month, which continue. And for us, it was about how do we actually change the narrative? What is partnership? And partnership is standing up and being uncomfortable. Partnership and friendship is about when your friend says, hey, I need you to come and support me making a submission. You say, I say sing, you say okay. Thankfully there were no videos of it. And when we reflect on conversation and walking into that new conversation, it's around leaning in. It's around face to face. It's around in a circle surrounded by your friends, but surrounded by those who are not your friends just yet. And so, of course, we reflect on there's the Flash t-shirts, by the way. We reflect on us as a community working together, walking together. And then, just hold the line caller. We have friendships and people who stand up and people who are willing to give it up for the sake of friendship, for the sake of a partnership, walking alongside each other. And as I look at this photo, and as the announcement was made that we're going to be entrenched in legislation, it was a celebration, but it was also with a heavy heart, because we know this isn't the answer. This isn't the golden bullet that solves everything. This is symbolic. It is symbolic of what is. And so the antics began. My office was occupied. And law was passed. And as I stood there and spoke in favour of a Māori ward, I reflected of the years and the challenges. I reflected on my maiden speech. I reflected on my friendship and of my Te Tiriti partnership. And as I stand in that chamber, reflecting on the fact that this is a place of oppression, that this building, this parliament, for more than 140 years, has been a place that's oppressed, but it's also a place of liberation. It can be, Debbie, it can be. We can work on it together, because it can be a place of liberation. And for someone like myself, I have experienced that personally, whether it be homosexual law reform, whether it be birth, deaths and marriages, whether it be marriage equality. I've experienced both sides of oppression, but also liberation. And how do we do that together? So, what could be? Well, it's already here. It's actually already, but it doesn't mean we sit back and relax. Co-governance, partnership, friendship is already here. Whether it be maunga taranaki, whether it be our infrastructure and our built and natural environment, whether it be our institutions, whether it be our people, our roading, whether it be our well-being and our healthcare, working together alongside each other in partnership is already here. And so, imagine being someone who's been curious, been scared, didn't grow up or understand what partnership was, but then to stand alongside a young man who was ignored, who was left to fend for himself and look after his brothers and sisters, but finding his path and his way in the world. Imagine two wahine from Mafel, brought up by their nan, with addiction and trauma always knocking on their door, but finding a path and becoming a nurse and finding these. And imagine this lot. Imagine what they're going to bring to the future of our world. Where even though we're not out of the trenches yet when it comes to settlement or it comes to future, but surely there's more of a clear path for them now in terms of imagining and dreaming of what could be. So these two, a friendship forged in daily life, in the ordinary, but extraordinary through a sound. And surely that is what partnership, surely that what Te Tiriti is all about. And surely it is about the next generation to come. And I'm hopeful and excited that as we move further into the 2021s and 22s and 23s, that Kingsley, that Malo, my mokopono, are going to experiencing something more dynamic and alive and brings us all with them, and it brings me hope. Kia ora koutou.
Nā mihi e hoa. It's my privilege to introduce David McLeod now. He's next on the alphabetical order. David is proud to call the New Plymouth electorate home. The family values instilled in him growing up on a dairy farm in Manaia have held him in good stead throughout his life. For David, strong families, caring communities and reward for hard work are at the centre of solving many of society's challenges. He is standing for National because it's the only party with a plan to strengthen the economy so we can reduce the cost of living, lift incomes, build infrastructure, restore law and order, and deliver in education. Hey, this is from the National website, okay? He is pragmatic, energetic person who focuses on solutions and getting things done. Integrity, community, and family mean everything to David. He lives in New Plymouth with his wife Lisa, who's here tonight. Thank you for coming, Lisa. And together they have 3 adult children whom they are very proud of. It's also a privilege of mine to introduce David, who we've been working together on a kaupapa called Te Kawa o Rongo, which is about serving young Māori boys from around the maunga. And David is also a very practical man that on April 13th, the morning that we opened Te Wari Hononga, David had a yellow orange vest on as he was serving the people around here while we were all participating. So mihi a kia koe e ho. So let's welcome David McLeod, National candidate, as he comes to choose.
Pupu wha manawa tama. Whakaia manawa tama ki te rangi. Rangi nui, rangi roa, rangi tāua. Tāua nuku, tāua rangi e tū e. O humai tō wairua ora, he ora, te e Māori ora. Kia ora tātou katoa. Good evening, everybody. Do you have to speak louder, do I, Jay? Sorry. Now, Jay's absolutely correct that that's come off the party website. And I didn't know he had that as my intro, and hopefully that's the most political anything comes out of this evening. But I want to first acknowledge your mahi over the last 4 weeks, because I think the education to all the people that clearly want to be educated, want to listen to different perspectives, is a great thing for our community. And I'm a great supporter also of the fact that we've got Te Tiriti being taught in our schools for our young people and that type of thing, because I think as a country, if we don't understand our past, it's hard for us to have the vision for our future, acknowledging what that is in itself. I also want to acknowledge also Debbie and Glenn. I'm new to this game. They've been in it for a little while now. And I can tell you need a thick skin for what this is all about. You have challenging conversations, but that is the diversity that we have within our community. And I celebrate diversity. I celebrate the fact that we come to a conversation with different lenses, through different eyes, and we have a different outlook on where we see our future. And we all stand for different parties, but I'm absolutely certain that we have the same value, that we want the best for all of our people that are here in the country of New Zealand. And so Glenn and Debbie, I do want to acknowledge the fact of all the mahi that you've done over the last while for what you do for the country, and I congratulate you for that work. Also, Jay, I think, with that title called, was it the super awesome original story of governance? If you want to do another job outside being a reverend, I think you should come up with titles for all sorts of things, so that's an amazing title. And of course, this is about co-governance at the core of what this is about. And probably some of my experiences, it started probably with the Taranaki Regional Council. I had some time around that table, and I was elected there as a young fella. I was about 30 years of age. At that time, regional councils in New Zealand, I probably was the youngest by quite some way from any other person at that particular point in time. And I can also tell you that I was probably one of a very few number of Māori that were at regional council tables throughout the whole of New Zealand. And I can tell you that times have changed. 22, 23 years later, I'm pleased to say that we have progressed as a society, and that we do have Māori at most territorial local authorities and most regional councils and unitary authorities. And I think that's a superb outcome for us, because I am a great believer in having Māori, particularly mana whenua, Māori of the place, actually at these tables and being part of the decision making. I think we have a stronger decision making base as a result of that. Now, I'm probably going to surprise many of you with the fact that you know that I'm standing here on behalf of the Blue Party, National, and tell you that National is actually supportive of co-governance. So let me explain that. So National, who is the party that is along Labour, who has been successful in completing a number of treaty settlements, National has had many of its settlements inclusive of co-governance in those. What National is not supportive of with co-governance is, as an absolute, is at the public service level, at the higher level. Now let me explain that. Now this is a personal perspective. Māoridom, I've seen on many occasions with some of the governance roles that I've been part of at a national level, is that Māori that come into those conversations are very respectful of what they bring to that table. They bring a te ao Māori point of view, a Māori world point of view, but they're very careful not to say that we represent Māori. They can't do that. They tell us that is the fact that representation belongs at a hapu level, at a local level, at a mana whenua level. And it's that difference and that challenge at the national stage of how you actually have representation from Māori there. So the way I put it is that with regards to Māori wards within local government, with a lot of the co-governance with treaty settlements and the like, it's absolutely appropriate because it's of that localness. It's actually where they actually have what you might consider the mandate to be able to represent Māori of that place. So there's a subtleness there of actually what this is about when we talk about co-governance. And by the way, Jay, I know that you've explained co-governance throughout the weeks. I'm sorry, I came to the first week, but the place was so busy. I went over the vicarage, and unfortunately, we that didn't work. But and I apologise, I couldn't be at these sessions. And Te Waka, you and Puna with your session last week, I've been there. But politics, being politics, we're busy. So I think I just want people to understand that National actually support Māori being at decision-making tables. I've been at a number of national bodies, and I can tell you that the decision makers who actually appoint them, so with regards to state-owned enterprises and government situations, usually It's the State Services Commission that actually make the appointments at the agreement of the shareholding ministers. I personally have never been on a committee where there's not a good amount of Māori representation around that tebu. It's happening right now. But what we're at the moment, and I think this is where co-governance has gone astray, is with the likes of where it's perhaps been tried to be installed by policy, is that it's started to tear our communities apart. And perhaps it's a lot about the understanding of what this whole kaupapa here is about over the last 4 weeks. But the fact is that I cannot recall a time in my lifetime where I've seen our society fragmented, more polarised than what we are now. And I'm not saying it's just because of co-governance. I think there's all sorts of different reasons why that is. But the fact is, I think that we're actually almost sick as a society at the moment. And we need to do everything we can in our leadership roles to contribute to actually bring us back together. It's part of why am I wanting to go to Wellington? I'm going there because I'm confident that I can contribute to a better outcome for our society. Of course, I've got a big step, which is called an election in front of us. Hey, Glenn. But it's about going down there and going into that chambers that you pointed to. Honestly, Debbie and Glenn, I believe that central government is unnecessarily ugly. I think there's far too much personal attack and far too much playing the person rather than the ball. We've got to be playing on policy. This should be a contest of ideas. And Glenn, we've had conversations about the campaign that we're going into. It's not about you or I. It's about the ideas that we can bring to the table, the contests. And that's where I think it belongs. But what I've observed is far too often, it's not the case in politics. We see personal shots in there. Why is that? All it does, in my opinion, is stop people wanting to be involved in that process. If we want the best possible people down in Wellington to run our country, this is the most important, if you want to term it as a company, it's the most important business that we have in our country. It touches every one of our lives, what's happening in Wellington. And if you run a business, there are two things you really want to do. Number one, create a culture that retains great people and create a culture that attracts good people. But I think we're at risk that that's actually weakened as a result of it. Just a little bit of a rant on my behalf. And I apologise, I don't have any pretty pictures either with regards to it. But, I look to a future. We have to be aspirational. And I look to living in a community that has a strong social cohesion. I look where everyone I say everyone having a huge amount of pride in Māori culture. Everyone, this is New Zealand. We should be proud of our Māori heritage and that we shouldn't be proud of our history. I could talk to one blue in the face about the wrongdoings and everything as a result since the signing of Te Tiriti, and you've done a great job of educating people, Jay. But there's a sick history that we need to acknowledge, but we can't dwell there. We have to move forward as a nation. I want a place where mana whenua are valued at all decision-making tables. Mana whenua. I want a place where we acknowledge our past, but we have a strong focus for a prosperous future. I want a place where diversity of views is respected and celebrated. Just like to talk on that. Diversity is something that we should celebrate. I celebrate it. Decision-making tables, if you have the sameness around it, it will be weak in what it provides as decisions itself. So in a corporate sense, a board of directors, if it's a board full of accountants and lawyers only, it will be weak. You need more diversity than that. And a strong appointment process provides that diversity. And on many occasions, a lot of people understand the value of having Māori at that table as well, because they have a significant contribution for potentially that entity. Diversity is really important. I talked about the polarisation of our society. We are losing our ability to bring those diverse views to the same table and have a constructive, polite conversation, even though you may leave the table agreeing to disagree. That could be an outcome. But we are getting close to a society where it's too often people throwing sticks and stones at each other from afar and not willing to come to the same room, to the same table. And we all have a part to play in correcting that. Everybody. Don't point to leaders and, that's your job, what are you going to do about it? It's all of us. And you mentioned abuse, strong families, caring communities. That's what I'm talking about there. I'm talking about everybody looking out for one another. When was the last time you went and spoke to your neighbours? It's such a simple thing, but the fact that makes a stronger community, caring for one another. I think a lot of the mental health problems that we have in our society today are the result of a lack of communication. You need to be proactive yourself personally to be part of the solution, to be a better place. I also want a place where we're rewarded for hard work and we're not frowned upon for the successes that you are. We have a lot of people that do some great things in our society, but dare I say it, the more successful they become, and remember success, particularly in business, it allows you to employ more people, it allows you to pay higher wages, you actually pay more taxes on the profits you make. That's where the country earns its living to be able to go and do some of the good stuff that we want to do in the most challenging parts of our society. You have to earn $1 to spend $1. We shouldn't be afraid of having success in our community. Our society here in New Plymouth has been a huge benefactor from some of the most successful people we've had in business and the likes here in Tara. If you have a look at the lifestyle that we enjoy, a lot of that is a result of philanthropy and for the giving of corporates, good corporate citizenship, all that type of thing. It's not a bad thing itself. I also want a place where we're all immensely proud to call this place home. I'm starting to have communications about people that are thinking of leaving these shores. Where have we come? We live in the best place on planet Earth here in New Zealand, and we live in possibly the best region. It is the best region in New Zealand. It is the best region, honestly. We just need to join together more as a community to be able to mend some of the challenges that we have in front of us. Dare I say it, in this room here, this group, there will be absolutely polarising points of views with different things. That's not bad. But you need to constructively and politely talk about that. That's what I ask, is be part of the solution. Kia ora koutou.
Someone's asked the question, no hair queer. Where's David from? What's his whakapapa?
Okay. Is it all good?
I knew I was going to do that.
Health and safety. I affiliate to Ngāti Mutinga and to Ngāti Ruanui. Debbie's patched there, but I also, through one of my grandparents, down to Kaitahu, down to the South Island, and also over to Ngāti Porou is my affiliations iwi-wise. You mentioned that I was brought on a dairy farm. So my grandfather, he was the third Māori doctor in New Zealand, and he was great mates with Sir Peter Buck in that. So he was brought up in that generation, and he served people all over the place. He served the Chatham Islands as a doctor. He went to Niue, he went to the Cook Islands, and he retired not retired, he bought the Manaia GP practice. And that's how my mother, who was Māori, got to meet my father, who was a white farmer in Manaia. And that's why I'm Taranaki based here, where a lot of my whānau is Kaitahu. Kia ora.
Thank you. Last but absolutely not least, we have Debbie Ngārewa coming to share with us tonight. Let me get her slides up and going here. My mouse has just disappeared. Here we go. This should come up. Yep, ka pai. Off the coast of Te Tai Hauru, a descendant of Ngāti Ruanui, Ngārua Ine and Ngārauru, Debbie Ngārewa is a current List MP and co-leader for Te Pāti Māori. She has been selected to stand again for Te Tai Hauru electorate in 2023 and hopes that the mahi she has done over the past 3 years as the party's co-leader and as a list member would have given her electorate confidence in her ability and be a strong advocate for Te Tai Hauru. Debbie is very much a grassroots activist and environmental campaigner. Prior to her becoming an MP, she had more than 2 decades experience in governance, executive management and iwi leadership. Her mahi in mobilising her iwi and local community in the campaign against seabed mining off the South Taranaki coast has continued to be reflected throughout her time in Parliament. A couple of months ago at Te Rā o Tā Maui Pōmare, at Sir Maui Pōmare Day at Orwai, it was my privilege to listen to Debbie speak, and I was just so inspired by what she had to say. And this hui was running in my mind, and I knew we had to have her come and share. So I just want you guys to know that she turned down the project for you fellas tonight. Hey? True story. She turned down being on TV to hang out with you cats. So haere mai oho, please come and share. Round of applause for Debbie Ngārewa Paka. Kia ora.
So, are you all right? You're right there, Jay. Wa tuatahi ngā mihi ki a koutou kua tai mai, ki te mana o te whenua, ngā te tawhiti, ka nui te aroha kei a koutou. Ka huri au ki te mihi ki ngā mema o Parimata, me he mea ngā mema hou, aroha atu. Engari, ka huri au ki te mihi, ka nui te mihi kei a koutou ngā tangata tariti kua tai mai ki te kōrero rero e pāna ki Aotearoa. Nō reira, it's a real privilege. I don't actually really know what project it was, but it's a real privilege to have turned that down to be home. And to be here with you all, thank you. And to be here with you all tonight to have a kōrero, and a really long overdue kōrero about ourselves. And I just want to start by saying, whenever we go to kaupapa, we always introduce our wakapapa, but we never really take the time to mihi to our tangata tariti. My mum is one of the best tangata tariti I know in the world. Mum's Noa Island, and my father has never left the table. He has always been here as tangata whenua. Those that know him know he may be small in stature, but he is large in attitude. And my mama was a better real speaker than my papa, and most of my social, cultural activism views come from my mama. Our tangata tariti are the most important people in our lives as tangata whenua right now. And it's really important that we mihi to you and thank you for being here and being able to give us the forum to talk to you. because every other place I go, everyone is yelling at each other, being confusing and real havoc at a time when we have the opportunity to grow some real, I think, amazing future and future generations. I think before us is the demand of a younger generation, and our young kōtero that's here, kānui te aroha ke a koe, tuku iramitu, and we are being watched. And I think I want to start on that kōrero. If you look at me here today, I am the mokopuna of Te Toko Waru, who used force possible to push back, to protect his mokopuna. I'm the mokopuna of tohu and te whiti. In fact, my great koro was buried with tohu's Bible, who believed and did everything they could to peacefully resist what was happening to their people. They fought, they were peaceful. We were also part of Ratana. We were also part of the Kingitanga. We were also part of every collective possible to try to make sure that their mokopuna could live in peace and dignity. And all of that, there were 266 petitions, I understood, that came out of Taranaki to stop the theft, to stop the onslaught that was happening to us as Taranaki. Now, in all of that backdrop, not once, and I was raised in a 3-generational home. My koro was born in 1901, the same year Queen Victoria died, and I don't even know how I know that, but we were raised knowing that. Not once did I ever hear any hatred. I have kuia who were impregnated because of Parihaka's desecration, because of the violence that happened there. Not once was I raised in any type of hatred or unforgiveness. Always brought up to believe that there was hope. At times there was real confusion. At times there was a sense of bereavedness and all the poverty that's hit us. Well, we have the opportunity to turn that around. But at once, I want to say this to you as our tangata tiriti, not once was I raised believing that we wouldn't sort this out. So I want to thank you for that opportunity. I think one of the things that we've talked about is that, and I understand the kōrero in my tūngani before me, every day we watch our land that has richness of oil and minerals, and our land that has the richness of dairy doing really well for Taranaki. It doesn't do well for the original indigenous peoples of Aotearoa. So we need to just accept that for what it is. It doesn't mean the fact that we have been bereft, the fact that we watch and we talk about an economy that's thriving. When I come from an area that has blocks of land called Ngarewa blocks, we have never farmed them since we were forcibly removed. 72 of my koro's fathers, brothers, uncles, both sets of grandfathers, was forcibly taken down in 1869 to Dunedin because they were trying to stop their land from being taken. 72. One survived, which was my papa's grandfather, beg your pardon, Hohepa Ngarewa. They came back and changed his name because they weren't allowed to get through Wairoite, or we weren't allowed to return through Waverley, because their names were all known. If they returned, they would be dealt with. So there is a long history of every reason why we shouldn't be sitting here at this conversation, not feeling bereft or begrudged. What's hard is that just because we need to talk about that, because we still need to lift our trauma, it doesn't mean that we're trying to dump it on today's generation. What we're trying to say is, it happened, and it may take me generations to get over. My father's family, my koko, raised dad, and my mama made sure that their intervention to turn this situation around for us, to address the poverty that we'd had inflicted on us, was to adopt an aggressive strategy of education. So nearly everybody in my family are either teachers. My sister's the Prince Oxford College. I was the only one that escaped being a teacher, thank goodness. I'm not sure I would have been a good one. But education was what everybody went broke for. I'm the oldest grandchild. I was sent to boarding school. That was the way that our family immediately addressed in 2 generations how to turn the situation around. So we're not laying down. We're not, I think there's a sense of, you're angry, you're envious of wealth. We're not envious of wealth. We just want a system designed to treat us all the same. And at the moment, we're living in a nation where 2.1 million of us are living on less than 30,000. A large proportion of that are our elderly, and the most homelessness that we have are our rangatahi. It is what it is. But if we keep pretending that those who are bereft are anti-progress or anti-economic development, we're going to miss the opportunities that I think that we have before us. One of the things, when we talk about all of the fact that there was never any hatred, and I don't remember, again in this 3-generational home, I don't remember ever thinking that we had right but to forgive each other. I don't believe that anybody ever wanted to have a conversation across each other. And I think what's right is that we're having this discussion about ourselves because the title, the term of co-governance, is being used to trigger fear, deliberately to corral votes. And I wish we were having this discussion without that environment, because I think we would probably be a lot more relaxed, and I wouldn't be as nervous as I am here to try and talk about things that I hope you can get a tangata whenua perspective into some of the digestion of what's going on. And it's really worrying that we're not all thick-skinned, and that my rangatahi, I have 9 mokopuna, and it's really worrying that they have to live in an environment like my koro did, where we're fearful of expressing and just simply being ourselves. It's really horrible that I see people who should be enjoying retirement, who perhaps haven't lived in diverse communities coming across like me, and they don't. They think that we're out to be separatists, to create or take something from them, or at stages we've even had one that think that we're going to kill them in their sleep. I mean, I just don't get. I can't fathom where and why somebody would drive that degree of fear up in our elderly, and it's not coincidental. It's not coincidental that some of this has been driven up in the 90 days before the elections. It's not coincidental that politicians who are talking about economic relief are also the same types of people funding that cycle. It's not a coincidental that the 2% who own the 50% of the wealth are behind this, because the proposition of us getting on could effectively change the way that the economy is being currently run in Aotearoa. And I just want to leave that there. I mean, imagine if we all got on. Imagine if we didn't have to continuously fund initiatives and government department initiatives that weren't working. Imagine if this is the way that we dealt with homelessness, all coming together and the right people running it. Imagine if we were able to look after our own education issues and get our kids to achieve and aspire and reach their true potential. Imagine if we were able to deal with the gangs and stop and empty and have no prisons. Who stands the most to gain from peace? Because Aotearoa, no matter how we want to look at it, was not built on hard work. It was not built on hard work. And anyone that starts a conversation like that is in denial of how we all arrived here. It was not built of hard work. It was built of the pain and the displacement, and it was sponsored by the Crown to remove my people, your people, our people. It is what it is. And we can dress that up however you like us to dress it up. So the conversation, I think, is really about the fact that we've had this poverty approach to our relationships, the fact that we've had a deficit thinking to te tiriti, the fact that we've had a poverty approach to our imagination, and the myth that social cohesion isn't around us, or the fact that people want to live overseas, is fear-mongering. Yes, we are having some really gnarly conversations, right? And at either extremes, people are hurting and feeling threatened. And let's not forget that, anger is a consequence of fear. It's a reaction to fear. And at the moment, you'll see, and I know there was a recent poll about our race relationships, and it said that it's at its all-time worst. Actually, I put to you that it's probably at its all-time healthiest. because we're having a discussion. And yes, it's a discussion that, depending on which table you sit at, and don't forget, tangata whenua never left the table, there are going to be different proportions of how we react to that. I think the myth, first of all, that it's important to address inequities. And I sort of have a little slide here, and I try not to be political, I wasn't. But I really liked rangi nui. I have no time for privileged people who take advantage of their privileged positions to attack the weakest people in our society. We have inequities. We shouldn't be debating the inequities. We have them. And they're getting worse. And the more that the poverty and the divide between the super rich and those working and struggling. And yes, if you look at 2 people living on less than 30,000 a year, 30,000 a year, I want to identify some of those places. In Taranaki, that includes Pātea. Now let's talk about those iwi and the amount of land that they had stolen. And you know what? They didn't hate on Aotearoa. They forgave Aotearoa, and they took 0.001% for every hectare that was taken from them. You know what they do? They went and created puia, and they celebrate that, and that is all of our win in Taranaki. That is our win. 30 years consecutive number one, and that is our win. They don't take that credit and say, oh, it's mine, just Māori. They don't sit there and take, it's mine just here, Auntie Bib, Auntie Bub. They're so proud that they're ambassadors for us all, that they let that be our win. So I put to you this proposition that we have to work hard and let's let the rich continue to look after us is a good proposition. It's just not. It's just not. Elderly, and I go and visit kaumātua who are sitting at home, and kaumātua that we both know, that we all three know, who are sitting with their lights off in blankets because they cannot afford to turn their heaters on. They're choosing what they're eating. They cannot afford a decent amount of protein. That is not an Aotearoa that we should be proud of, I know. And if we're going to address the poverty issues and the inequity issues and the horrible way that people are using hate to incite confusion, then we're going to miss the biggest part of the we should be having right now, which is cooperation. Co-governance is a side issue. We should be cooperating. We should be co-partnering and co-looking after each other. This is not the way. Combining. Be here for everyone in this room. My politics is to bring up those who are left behind, because that's how I was raised. I wish I was raised to just look after number one and walk down the street, because that would be so much easier. But I was raised with a social conscience by a collective community that belongs here in Taranaki. We have led the path on many things, and we will continue to lead the path, even on this really gnarly discussion. One of the things that really frightened me, and I had this issue, is that 70% of Māori, I don't know if you realise this, are under the age of 40, 25% under the age of 21. So assume that we continue to make and continue to have mokopuna, which is nothing's making me think that's going to change. We're going to have this growing youth population. As an ageing person, I want to make sure I'm on the right side of history. I want to make sure that my kids, who have married into every culture possible, are going to grow up knowing that they deserve every peace and dignity and ability to reach their true potential no matter what. And I don't want the confusion of our debate over reti, should I co-govern, should I not co-govern. That is a sideline issue to the real opportunities we're missing with each other. We did this, and I look again, you don't have to agree with the topic, but we did this survey and it was really interesting. And even our poll, I'm not talking about politics, that is tangata tiriti that often are polling for us. It's not Māori. And I want to really say that again. That is tangata tiriti who have been polled on our party votes, not Māori. And when we did this, restoring our name to Aotearoa and Māori place names, which we've started with our maunga. You know, I remember 20 odd years ago, the whole world, the sky was going to fall in and it was all going to end. It didn't. And now we're here. We're there. And that's why it's really important at home we have that discussion. We're simply there where we were when we were Mont and Taranaki. We're there. I was horrified when I heard the story at the signing of our maunga. I don't know if you all know this, But the Egmont family were contacted to say, oh, look, we're going to change the name to... And Lord Egmont family, I hope you're okay about that. And they said, look, it doesn't matter. We were never going to go to South Africa anyway. And I thought, oh. So when we go back to where our hang-ups are, they're really not what we think they are. We have entrenched ourselves in traditions for a very long time. And what really worries me is the lack of conversation and opportunity that we're denying each other to have. While we're being distracted by other agendas, and I put you, they're not our agendas. Like every time those sorts of extremes hit, the socials and hit kaupapa, they're actually not our agendas. What our agenda should be is how we take your tangata whenua. Because nowhere else am I tangata whenua. How we take your tangata whenua from survivance to thrivance. Because at the moment, our tangata whenua, we as tangata whenua, are not doing great. And our tangata whenua made up a large proportion, as I said, of youth, under 40, which haven't been for a little while. And I think if we were to talk and have a look at that and take a step back and think about that day, that hour, that minute, before politicians decided to do what they did to us here as tangata whenua. And let's have a think about that. The day, the hour, the minute, before politicians decided to make that decision. Because remember, it was politicians. When the tiriti was signed, we were living in harmony. The tiriti came about to help look after the British citizens who were turning up and weren't behaving. For thousands of years, tangata whenua had been living under their own construct. We are the most regulated people in the world. Honestly, I don't know, you're not allowed to leave your hair from your brush. We'll make sure your shoes are such that you sit there, you've got to make your mattress a certain way, you've got to have your hair, the certain low colours, and this low colours on this side, that side. We are the most regulated people I know. I know, and I tell you, that tells us that we were self-managing, we were okay. No doubt, the moriworis did happen in their own way, but not the way that people like to say it. No doubt, we had fights. I mean, I'm half Irish, I don't even want to talk about fights. But the reality is, if we were to take a step back to that day, that hour, that minute, before politicians decided to breach te tiriti, what would we have done? What would we have said to those politicians? What would our letters to them look like? What would our conversation to that tangata whenua whānau we were living next door to be? What would our conversations with that marae, who were doing their gardens, who were out there at the hapu, who we were trading with, who'd been overseas, who were sophisticated, what would we in this room have done? And I put to you, that's where we are today. This is politicians. And everyone sits here and says, I'm not this. No, this is politicians that are leading this conversation. And they have taken it down into the depths of all the depths, the lowest of all the lows, because we're at a stage of advancement. And it's as uncomfortable as shit. And we all have to move over and make some space. In my life, when I was sitting here thinking, what is the mihi that I give to tangata tiriti? I know the mihi for mana whenua. I know the mihi to my maunga, my awa, and I'm really sorry because I don't know. So you have to hold me accountable just as much. As tangata whenua, it is my obligation to look after all of you, to make sure this whenua, to make sure my behaviour, to make sure my whānau's behaviour, to your whānau's behaviour, has mana, because you're tapu. You are connected to me whether you like it or not. And I'm going to get things wrong because I'm human. But what makes me really sad is as a tangata whenua wahine, I don't know how I mihi to my tangata tiriti. And tangata tiriti, you're the rongoa. You have to front some of this because every time we do, we're using the race card. Every time we do, we're about our own agenda. We've been separatists. And there's a whole lot of attention, not just at home in our mokos, but other Indigenous peoples are looking at us. And we've got a real responsibility on us. And I've never felt the weight of that. more so than I have now. And my biggest counsel, my tangata tariti mother, said to me, for too long, tangata tariti have been silent. And I wish that we were really side by side with you on this one. But actually, it's yours. It's yours to own. They are your people to discipline. They are yours to bring into order. And every time we have this discussion, I keep looking at it and thinking, they don't need to be converted from me. It's actually you. And I think that's the beauty of this forum and coming together. I want to go back to that discussion about what would our letters to those politicians say if we knew what we know now. And remember, we didn't have the internet. Things were sweeping out as they were moving into Taranaki, as they were sweeping and gathering old people and sick people, as they were dragging them more back into the bush where they were starving them out, as they were doing truces and completely reneging on them. We didn't know because we didn't have the phone, we didn't have the internet. They had complete control of the media. But if that did happen today, what would we do? Would we let those politicians go down the route they went down? And knowing the poverty and the harm, the trauma, the intergenerational mess that we still have to clean up. And like I say, it's okay for the Ngārewas because somebody adopted a really aggressive education strategy. I mean, I'm too scared not to study. I've done my master's, I've been to Stanford, I'm now doing my PhD because I'm so scared of that little Irish woman and that whole ingrained, and that, to be honest, I needed to actually say to my kuko as well, who's ingrained me, the only way to freedom is education, education. The reality is, though, I wish everyone had somebody like that in their lives. Not everyone were able to be redirected down that path. And the more we don't address the real issue in Aotearoa, the growing pain, the growing poverty, the fact that 2% of our population do extremely well in the name of economic development, we will have some unprecedented complex social issues that you see manifesting now. A growth of gangs, ram raids, poverties of crime, or crimes of poverty, sorry. And I worry that while we're out there as Māori leaders in our parties and our movement to try and bring the slowest person, the most hurt person, the most traumatised person up, justifying that inequities do exist, justifying that, shoot, we've tried it your way 183 years. We've tried it your way in your education system. We've tried it your way in the health system. We're dying 10 years early, and I'm not making that up. It's proof by every academic in science. I'm not here to sit there and ask for preferential treatment. I just don't want to leave another whanonga behind. So while we're doing that, the horizon and the imagination for us as Indigenous peoples is really limiting. But we do want to thrive. And we've run some surveys. We're running a social media program at the moment. This isn't political, but it is about asking everyone, what would an Aotearoa hou look like? We've done that on purpose. I know other parties say, get me back on track, get forward, go back, go sideways, go whatever. We had to use our platform at this time because we could see so much has been done to divide us. But we're not asking our people, young and old, brave and bold, what an Aotearoa hou would look like. And so we've done some of that. We've been, just don't look at the bottom bit, but 2 ticks would be good. But we've actually done, and we did this on purpose. Like, we're polling okay, we're feeling good, we're feeling great. I don't know about these two, but we're feeling great. One wants to be with us, the other doesn't. It doesn't matter. We know what we stand for. And I think we need to ask, when we get this moment with all this attention, you have choices. You can make political campaign yourself, or we can make it about ourselves. And we decided very early stage that we're not going to make it about ourselves, as in Debbie, Rawiri and now Mika. Thanks, Glenn. We're going to make this about yourselves. And every opportunity we have, with every dollar that we have, we are going to ask our community, ask Aotearoa, what does an Aotearoa hou look like? So I think the question to us today was our Indigenous imagination. And this is some of the feedback that we got. Moko Māori, movers, shakers, leading the world. That's my Aotearoa. Free of discrimination, free of anti-Māori, full of te tiriti justice, standing as one. Tough on healing. Tough on healing. Not having to fix any Te Pāti Māori billboards again. Oh, I bet that's my husband. I think what I wanted to say is that our conversations are often across each other. They're often about us without us. And while we're all politicians getting our act together and some are out there campaigning, I think it's really important that we have decisions. How do we use our sphere of influence? Moana Jackson always said, how do we use our sphere of influence when we're having that cup of tea, that hour, that minute before politicians made the decision to breach te tiriti and inflict some of the most cruelest, inhumane violence on tangata whenua? What would our conversation have been? What would we have done to have stopped it? Would we have written letters? Would we have turned our blind eye and walked away? Would we have gotten so involved to stop and help and stop the pain? I think your presence here today, doesn't matter whether you agree with me or not, that's not the issue. Actually, my son says that to me all the time. The issue is that we know we had choices to stop and change the conversation to be more about ourselves as communities, less about the politicians and how we use that sphere of influence. And I know it's probably not what politicians should be saying in a campaigning year, but I'm over it. The reality is, and then we can see it, alive, happy, safe, healthy, aligned, positive, grateful. Oh, there goes that bloody fixing billboards one again. And sorry, there's another one here. And I think if we were to go back, I'm not sure if I've got the right one, hang on. If we were to go back and look at all of the opportunities that are before us right now, is the opportunity for us to decide what kind of nation we want to leave for our future generations. And I'm going to leave it. One of the things that really worries me about the fact that we're talking across each other and not able to enjoy what could bring is that there are, and I'll say this again in my space as an ocean activist, is that I was part of a forum that went to United Nations in Portugal, and I listened to some of the discussions that were happening there, and it was amazing. One of the things that worries me is that while we continue with unprecedented poverty and some horrific changes coming into us environmentally, they are all things that we have control of. In a minute, somebody could change poverty. In a minute. Politicians could decide to, horror, I know, David, but they could flip it upside down and change the tax system. We could be pursuing the $7 billion tax evasion instead of the $2 million grassroots. These are things that you just don't see the focus on. But one of the things that I was struck with, and we have it now, in Wanganui, there is a real strong relationship that the tangata whenua have with the longfin eels. And they would move and adjust the way that things would happen so that the management and the future proofing of that population was protected. Those are conversations that come from ancient years and wisdom. And it worries me that while we're dealing with some modern science and some modern dilemmas, inside of us, inside of your tangata whenua, are some real ancient wisdom. And those are the conversations that we should be having with each other on how we preserve and protect our whānau, how we preserve and protect how we make sure that no one is starving, that no one is homeless. How on earth are we a nation with 120,000 empty homes and 90,000 homeless people? What the hell's happened? So those are conversations, I think, within the wisdom of tangata whenua we should be promoting. And I'm just going to leave this thought with you, is I get that at different times, I don't know who in the room's experienced grief or extreme illness, but our ability to heal from grief and illness has to be done at our own time. And if we had that understanding and the opportunity to be that hour, that minute before that grief, that violence happened, we would redirect it. I don't bet there's a single person in this room that would have allowed to have what go on. But we do have the ability to continue to help each other to heal, including those who don't believe that tangata whenua belong or were ever at the table of co-governance. So the opportunity before us is to have those conversations and to encourage a healing Aotearoa hau. Kia ora rā.
Kia ora ho. Well, why don't we just take a 2-minute stretch, stand up, and we'll come back for the panel. Got some great questions coming to us. Yeah, is that all right?
Yeah, I just don't
was
want
gonna
you
say,
to
yeah.
accidentally do the signature.
Sorry about that.
Oh, I'm so tired.
Man, you want to get the duct tape?
Where's my phone?
You know what, I'm trying to find it. I was just saying to Jay, we can look it up YouTube and make a gift.
What's that? I'll make you
I've been going down.
Yeah, for sure. I'll do that for you, bro.
Can you?
I was like, surely.
This one. Tick, 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 tick. David, come and grab a seat. Okay, so it's maybe come a bit closer, David, because we're going to share this mic.
Right.
And
Hope my
pass
little legs
it
can
to
get up.
each other. Oh, yeah, grab it, yeah.
I was going to say, I hope my legs can go.
Rose between your thorns.
Steady.
I wonder what was in that basket.
Awesome. Well, thank you, team. I loved listening to all of you guys. The first question that I have that comes to mind is, in any of your history in your politics and with your parties, have any of you been in a conversation talking about the shadow side of your parties? What's the weakness of your parties, and where does because we all have our weaknesses, right? There's a weakness in our whether that's personally or as a corporation or an organisation. Do you talk about the shadow side of the Labour Party? That you're a bunch of commies, like on the worst side of it.
It's nice to be in confessional on a Tuesday night. Normally it's one-on-one, but that's okay.
That was just an example, by the way, Glenn. You know.
Oh no, I think we do often talk about the shadows in terms of winning, and what will we do to win, and that's, I think, sometimes an uncomfortable conversation we have. What are we willing to compromise for the sake of winning, which is hard because for many of us in a party like Labour, who is around the grassroots, working for transformation, working for workers' rights, for those on the margins, it's sometimes a hard conversation when you just want to be in this space. But to serve, sometimes some of us have to be in this middle space. And that's sometimes the media's not here, eh? No one's recording. Great, awesome.
Let's go down.
Whoever wants to jump on it.
Yeah, kia ora. I think we're always, I think we're probably more harder on ourselves and look at the things that we should be, could be, didn't do. We've been a party of two for a very long time, so we're co-leaders of each other. Right. But I guess the thing, though, is that we're not, we like that disruption because in Te Ao Māori and in Te Ao Pō, in the darkness comes some of the most strongest, fabulous green shoots. And so we've never been afraid of looking at our own, I don't know if it's shadows, but the other parts that we need to look into. I think we also are not a movement that's gone into government or gone into parliament to get into government. And so we're quite secure about our role as a movement and growing the movement and making sure no matter who it is, that we're able to hold them to account from the perspective of tangata whenua. I think if you live in Te Ao Māori and tangata whenua, you know that quite often some of your best ideas come out in the night. And also we need te pō as much as we need the dark, as much as we need the light. So it's a healthy way. Yeah.
So David, what's the weakness, the shadow side of the National Party?
Well, the problem is I'm so new that we haven't had the ability to caucus.
Yeah, I was thinking you're the lucky one, really.
I am.
Yeah.
The fact is that as a caucus for our party, I've had two opportunities to be part of that caucus, and really I haven't had the ability to get into that space. Right. But all I would say is that I'm fully expecting that there'll be policy that comes out that I'll be challenged with, quite frankly. Yep. And I'll be quite honest. There's every party. I don't think any party's perfect. Right. Type thing. So I'm fully expecting that I will be challenged.
Kia ora, kia ora. Okay, well, let's assume you've got the mic, mate. How about this? How do you plan to uphold the principles of partnership, participation and protection that are derived from Te Tiriti or Waitangi? And what specific actions will you take to ensure that Māori have a meaningful voice and role in the governance and future development of Aotearoa? I did not write this question. Okay, this is coming. Yep.
Well, first I want to respond. I've been asked the question many times, why the National Party? For me.
Kia ora.
And quite honestly, I think we have Tama and myself and a number of the other Māori that are endeavouring to get to Parliament for the National Party. And I think that's actually a good outcome for New Zealand if we have Māori in all the parties, because we actually all do have different, talk about that diversity of points of view. But I think the best outcome for the question there is exactly what we're doing here, is the fact that we can be together, we can form relationships, but more importantly, that if I'm lucky enough to get to Wellington with these two great people, is to be able to kōrero, is to be able to talk to each other in that polite, constructive way that I spoke of earlier on, and not to be strangers to one another, is to talk about these differences. Of course, we're sitting in different parties, but I think that togetherness, we can actually come up with positive solutions.
Couple. Just here's another question to sum up those questions. So Debbie, we can pass it on to you. It's the same question really, but said a lot more simpler in a way. For the candidates tonight, what does it mean to give effect to Te Tiriti o Waitangi? So what does it mean to give that effect in those principles, partnership, protection, however you interpret it? What does it mean to you?
Okay, for Te Pāti Māori, and I think for Māori full stop, we value and live to the articles of Te Tiriti, all 3+1. And from our perspective, our perspective is Tiriti Centric Aotearoa is, is our normal way of being. It's how we assess every legislation. It's how we assess policies that are coming at us. It's how we thrive and strive to live. So it's our normalisation, really, of everything we do, think and say.
Kia ora.
From a perspective personally, you have to talk to John about how that partnership's going. It's okay, I'm sure. Secondly, is within the Labour Party. I mean, very much it's around, for people like myself who are Pākehā, it's how do we step aside and not critique, control, or collude in the space of our Māori MPs, but also because the thing is, for something like Labour, it's a movement. So I've been a part of the movement for a long time. I was, in many ways, born into the movement, wasn't a member, but then, in my 30s, became a member of a movement, which happens to be a political party, have a political wing as well. And around how do my Pākehā colleagues actually step aside. And it's often a challenge because that grasp of power and we'll give you a bit and we'll celebrate because in the budget we gave you this bit of money and it's good because Māori got this amount, but how do we actually as Pākehā step aside and say to our Māori whānau, we trust you.
Let's take a real scenario here and. So let's take the decision of Minister Nanaia Mahuta and the Three Waters situation. Gosh, I'm stumbling all over the show tonight. So let's use that as an example where, what does it mean to give effect to Te Tiriti o Waitangi? Let's say the decision is giving effect to Te Tiriti o Waitangi in that thing, but there is a sentiment by a large portion of society that feels that's just the government making a decision, just stepping in and without talking to our people, without listening to us. What do you do with that feeling in the public?
You lean in, and when you say our people, you're talking. About tangata whenua or just people in general?
People in general. Let's just say, well, obviously, a portion of our society goes woohoo, another portion of ours put banners all around the country.
So you lean, yep.
So not realising that those banners are anti-Te Tiriti, but at the same time, a decision has been made that actually is trying to heal the past and make a change, but perhaps the way it's done, people feel like they're getting run over. What do you do with that?
The nature of politics, I struggle with because so often it's transactional and it's actually consultation is consultation. But in terms of that space, also see as a Labour Party, it's how do we be courageous in our leadership and hold the line when we know, and particularly for Nanaia, particularly for many of our MPs who took the heat and took the flack. But realising, looking 10, 20, 30 years into the future, we know that we've had the conversation, this is something that's actually transformational. And so often, how often have we done things? You talked about Egmont, right? In the 1980s and 90s here, the fact that, it was the earth was going to implode if people started calling it Taranaki. How do we... And then we come to a place now where it's Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori Week, and
You know, the paper, I don't think anyone's had a subscription cancelled this week because of what's on the masthead of the Taranaki Daily News. We move forward,
Right.
and in leadership, you have to be courageous and you have to hold the line, and it's uncomfortable.
Oh, okay.
I don't think it was a Labour question. I think because I probably come from a different perspective, and I'm going to go there. So the tiriti isn't a Māori thing.
Kia ora.
So we don't. I think what we do need to do is understand our relationship in te tiriti. And I just want to leave that there to swirl over, whether it's tangata whenua, tangata tiriti, tangata moana. We all have an obligation, and we all fit in te tiriti. When we give effect to changes, I mean, Three Waters was an infrastructure. We didn't actually vote for it, by the way, for a whole other reason. And the reason we didn't vote for it is because the issues of our taonga actually lie within te tiriti, and they haven't been resolved for tangata whenua. So fundamentally, when you talk about how did we give effect to te tiriti, we hold the line when it comes to the role of tangata whenua and their rights and interests being respected. So often we won't get caught in the incremental small detail, and we watched and it was horrific. What Nanaia went through was horrific. But I also think there was a whole layers of misunderstanding. The worst comms I've ever seen in my life. The worst communication about what it meant. And therefore, when we were trying to have the rights discussion as tangata whenua, it was just over the top of everybody. So we were wahangu, while we watched a transactional discussion and debate go down.
Kia ora.
Yeah, I agree with what Debbie's just said there about the comms and the process itself. I think one of the challenges that Nanaia had was keeping everybody on the bus, so to speak. I was on local government at that time, and we've got district councillors here as well, is that local government was such a key partner in the success of that journey was had. But unfortunately, I think it did come back to some comms, some lack of some certain strong comms to make sure that people were taking that journey with them and taking it back to their communities itself. And because of that, it became a mess. And we, National, also didn't support it alongside Te Pāti Māori.
Sorry, are you...
Can I just mitigate that? I think, though, to be fair, National drove quite an aggressive campaign about the mischief of, and again, we see the effect of that type of counterattack, which really is what we see floating around, even with this confusion of co-governance, the separatism of assets. Now, we know, and you know, in South Taranaki, when I was South Taranaki District Mayor, there was a water infrastructure that was devolved to private owners. This was not a first, and it was done when we had a national government who had to sign it off. The problem is that we are often caught in conversations that politicians lead for their own agenda, right. and because we weren't secure in our own conversations about where this was going, we missed the bus. But that doesn't excuse the mist around at all. And I just want to say that from the little party watching the swirl going on. It was deliberate and targeted. This was not deliberate and targeted.
I'm not going to turn this into a political debate.
Hey, David, could I just ask you if I heard what I thought I heard you say, is that the problem was that central government sort of started with local government and then backed away from local, then sort of cut local government off? Is that summarizing up what you said?
I think in my observations of the process was the minister came out to local government and had a kōrero.
Yep.
And said that this was a genuine conversation, a two-way conversation, but then local government, from what I just saw, the policy just come straight at them, ignoring what they were saying.
Okay.
And so it lost them as a result of that.
So, cool. So my next question is then, I was glad to hear you say that national support co-governance, that was said tonight, but then you distinguished it about talking about the role of haputanga, the role of hapu and iwi on the ground. So let's take that scenario of central overriding local government. That sentiment is feeling overrun. Well, the same sentiment is appropriate for hapu. So what sort of connection could government make to strengthen a relationship with hapu?
I think I need to start at the iwi level. I'm a strong believer that the iwi construct of today is a white man's construct for the purposes of central government to be able to have an easier conversation with Māoridom, rather than the challenge of the plethora of hapu throughout our country. So iwi, in its form today, my belief is that it was a Pākehā construct because of that process itself. But I also observe that iwi, when they're settled, are very, very mindful of the fact that the decision-making takes place at the apu level, not at the iwi level. So you go talk to the iwi, we have a lot of people that wanted to get consents and all that sort of stuff, and they go to the iwi, and I haven't seen too many iwi don't say, go and talk to the hapu, the mana whenua.
Right.
Because that's the respect that they have of actually appropriately making decisions on behalf of the whenua.
Any other comments around that from you two?
What was the question?
The question was how the feeling of central government overriding local government on some decisions, and I was just trying to relate that back to the feeling of hapu then. What does that feel like for... I can ask you guys another question actually, answer, but anyway. Please talk right into the mic, guys. This is for everyone, but it starts off with saying, David spent a great deal of time expressing a problem with the way discourse takes place in our modern society. What solutions would you all have for our national elections to propose the remedy of the lack of discourse? The lack of discourse around Te Tiriti stuff, the lack of discourse around shared partnership.
These are big questions, Jay.
Big thinkers out there, folks. Big thinkers.
How would I answer? I would suggest, I'm a great believer of communications. Being able to kōrero, be able to talk, to be able to come to the same table and talk. And so I said earlier on, is that we are increasingly having parts of our community that aren't coming to the table and aren't courageous enough, perhaps, to actually talk to someone that point of view to you. Yeah, so it's sort of, I think my thought is along the lines of bringing together of actually people to have a constructive, polite conversation.
Okay.
And I said before, you may leave that agreeing to disagree.
Right.
But that's not wrong, unless you're actually in a relationship. But you're not in a relationship when there's someone in that room over there and you're over here and you're just throwing sticks at stones at each other.
I think, to be honest, there's probably been 183 years of very polite conversation, which is perhaps why we're here. I think in the first instance, the biggest way that we can grow and affect change is in our education system. And I think, and I really am grateful for the young Tāne that came up, I think it's really important that we get an education system that reflects and encourages debate, constructive learnings of what it is and how our nationhood got to be who we are. I think it's also really important to be at the other end, hold governments to a task. And we have a whole lot of official boards whose role is to oversee the duopoly of supermarkets, which they don't do very well, or to oversee decommissioning of all the minerals, which they don't do very well, or a whole lot of other things. What I think there needs to be is a commissioning agency whose role is to oversee the government and its application of Te Tiriti and hold the agency and hold politicians to task that would permeate down into from a central to a local government perspective. Its role would be to advise and to counsel on where it's going wrong, but it would have teeth. It would be funded, and I think that way we have two prongs of it. We have up here where, in fact, when we see a lack of ignorance, or a lack of understanding, ignorance applied, whether it be through agencies that are profiling in police and justice, whatever, they're taken to task. And most importantly, as we grow our young ones, and to be very fluid with what te tiriti is, between the two, and I think we're moving there will be a solution that continues to evolve. And I think that's the issue. We've been raised to think that the tiriti's role is to do settlements and then it's finished.
Right. Kia ora.
The tiriti's role is to be honoured, but we actually don't know how to do that because we don't know the context of settlements. And most people think, why aren't those iwi elite looking after their own? The reality is iwi are wakapapa, and wakapapa is complex. I don't know how many here are related to the O'Shanasseys and the Joneses and the Browns, but they're all extremely complex. As a hapu and mana whenua, we need to leave that discussion within Te Ao Māori. But what we have is a lack of understanding that settlements are historic and deal with 1% generally of what was lost.
Right.
A 99% stands out in the air. And people don't see settlements as being full and final because the grievance of them is still being realised today. So I think it's an and conversation where we address and end the fiscal envelope, where we put efforts into settling and honouring a culture of honouring te tiriti that we all belong in, not just a settlement culture.
Kia ora. Debbie, just keep the microphone there. Are Pākehā floaters, this is what it says, are Pākehā floaters allowed / able to vote for Te Pāti Māori?
Pākehā floaters.
Pākehā floaters, I don't know what that means. But hey.
We get asked that all the time, You can vote for the party but not the candidate, which really annoys my mother, but absolutely. And we have a long history and staunch support from our tangata tiriti.
Okay, second to last question. It's been acknowledged our taiohi, our rangatahi, our young people, and the taiohi Māori are struggling. Homelessness, suicide rates, youth crime, etc. Do you feel our current response to and services for taiohi reflect te tiriti o Waitangi? And what do you think we could be to do it better? What do you think we can be doing to do it better? Do they reflect te tiriti? What can we be doing to do it better? Services to taiohi.
No, and partnership. So it's actually, I think if you look at the services, and again, someone sitting here quite aware of who I am, aware of my Pākehā whakapapa, aware of the space I had the privilege of sitting in, but then sitting in a space that predominantly was walking alongside Māori rangatahi, and so for me it's been really obvious around how do I walk alongside with, and I think for many of the organisations we look at and many of our youth services, they're still very Pākehā centric, and like I said earlier, my thing is how do we actually get out of the way, because I think so often we don't, or we do it in word only, or we do it in a slight action, but with expectations and with KPIs to meet, and if you don't meet them, then we take that money away from you. So is how do we find ways where I and the people I represent and the people in Parliament and the people in those bureaucratic and those leadership management roles actually fully understand and get out of the way. Can I just add, if it's the last question, because the previous question that was talked about, and this is not a Labour Party manifesto promise, this is not a Labour Party thing, evidently I'm not allowed to have an opinion, but I do, and that is, my thing is I've thought a lot about it, getting into Parliament and seeing that space, and we had an upper house until 1951 and we abolished it, and so we have the one house, right? I've reflected a lot on the fact, what would it look like if we reinstated the upper house with a 50-50 with a cooperation working together. And for those who freak out immediately, it's not about, they don't create legislation, they critique legislation. So what you were saying before, Debbie, it's around how does every piece that comes through the House of Commons that gets sent up to the upper house, and then they critique it and they go, actually, no, send it back, work on it. Yep, no, send it back, work on it. No, send it. I think those sorts of things are something, and again,
What you're saying is that
view.
there's other ways of governing.
There's other ways of governing, and
that's right.
and I guess that's from that government level. But how do we break that down from government to local government to communities and to our whānau? Because that's what we do every day, right?
Okay, cool.
I think, yeah, great. I think just got some claps.
You go.
I think there were three. I think there were the discussion about rangatahi. Are we resourcing solutions for our rangatahi enough? And I often will be quoted as saying this, that rangatahi Māori, in fact, are not the problem waiting to be punished. They're the solution waiting to happen. And I'm really glad that there is support for voters to go down to the age of 16 because of the age profile that we have confronting us at the moment. I think there are some amazing models out there, and of course I'm going to champion whānau ora, not just because we created it, but also because it works. And I think we need to admit now that we have a nation that is struggling to provide the degree of health, mental health and support for ourselves. It's because they're actually not available at a local level. So I'm a real believer in devolving resources out to communities. I'm a real believer that those communities are often going to be iwi hapu Māori-led NGOs, and they have a better pulse. We saw it during COVID. I mean, we saw how we all stood up our own selves. The same when we see when there's an immediate, we had a weather in South Taranaki, same as we see, the maraes open up their door, they've got this sorted out, we've locked down this, love it or hate it, their reaction and ability to mobilise to an acute problem, it needs to be done in real time. The problem that we have is actually wrenching that out of the hands of bureaucracy, which is quite entrenched, and it has multi-layers to actually try and devolve the resources. So our belief is that we need to see the resourcing, 25% of resourcing come out to the communities to address the problems ourselves of our rangatahi. They're saying that we have a 70% problem in Oranga Tamariki, then 70% of that resourcing should come out to the communities that are dealing with it in real time. It is that acute. Now, there's something to be said that we must have done right in our history, why we didn't have prisons. There's something to be said in my family, we have 3 whāngai. Now, those whāngai were brought into our family when maybe mum wasn't well or something was going on or had too many kids. Everyone just leant in and helped. But we didn't need the degree of resourcing to pull those models off now. So I put that's what we need to be focusing on.
Kia ora, Debbie. David.
There's plenty of great community groups doing excellent work, and I've had visibility over some of those. And I think government needs to get out of the way. I think I agree with Debbie, is the fact that these entities need to be identified that are doing quality work, and they need to be supported by taxpayer money going to support them to actually do even more good work.
Right.
And there's, I won't start naming them, but there's a plethora of, it says to me is that word subsidiarity, having the decisions made as close to the communities that are affected by it. And I live by that. I believe that decisions should be as close as it possibly can. And far too often we have policy written out of Wellington that doesn't have the context of the localness. And Debbie, back with the vaccination rollouts and what you and your iwi did in that, well, our iwi, but the fact is our accolades to you. But that's that localness that brings out great outcomes for us. And are we learning from that? I don't know whether we are. I think that we need to recognise that central government needs to be brave in devolving some of that power closer to the communities. So far too often we have a one-size-fits-all in our country, and when it comes out to our places, I experienced this at the regional council, and we looked at coming and said, this doesn't make sense for here. This is ridiculous. So we need to start to devolve that decision-making closer to us.
Kia ora. Okay, final question, and it has to be quick. How How, in 17 years, how do you want to celebrate 2040, the bicentennial of Te Tiriti o Waitangi? What do you want to see New Zealand be like in 17 years when it comes to that, and when it comes to February the 6th, 2040?
I want every New Zealander to be understanding of what that history is, acknowledging the wrongs, and celebrating as a country as a whole. As that you mentioned on your one of your presentations, Debbie, about walking together as one. I think that's what I would see as success.
Kia ora.
I think in 17 years, those who are 25% of the population will be in their 40s. What I hope that we do is we take the hard hits now and we do what my ancestors did, which is they did everything within their human spiritual capacity to make things move so that they can reach their true potential and live with peace and dignity.
Kia ora. Kia ora.
The two last photos I had on my talk, Marlo will be 18 and Kingsley will be 24. And my hope is that they will be able to celebrate who they are without the trauma that has gone before them. My hope for 2040 is that they will be fully ordinarily extraordinary. Is that a term? That they will be ordinary extraordinary in terms of they are Māori and they are proud and extraordinary, but they will just be an ordinary part of our society, and there won't be what I've seen and what I've observed in walking alongside young Māori that I've worked with, but the fact that they will be celebrated and they will celebrate.
Kia ora. Round of applause for our panel tonight. Thank you, team. Thank you very much. Thank you. Kia ora whānau. Well, if we have clocked over to 8 minutes past 9, can you give me 4 or 5 minutes? You can say no. Hips is saying no. Kei te pai. Just a couple of closing comments on my behalf. If I can play mind games with you to close, imagine last Christmas Day. Just imagine it. What food were you eating? What music was playing? Who can see the picture in their mind right now of last Christmas Day? Who can see it? Put your hand up if it's a photo. Put your hand up if it's a movie, if it's a moving picture. Can anyone mood? Okay, now I'm going to give each of you $5,000 for this coming Christmas Day. Okay, going to give you $5,000 to throw a party. What are you going to do this Christmas Day with that extra $5,000? I want you to create a party right now in your mind. Okay, what's at the party? Family? Okay. What else is at the party? Street party? Have you ever had a street party before? Yep. Okay, what's at the party? What else? Kai? What kai? Kai moana? Have you ever had kai moana before? Oh, yeah. What else? What's at the party? What was that down the back? What's the music? What music you got at your party there? Indie? Rock. Oh, okay, right, whatever. Okay, now, who has got something at the party that you've never, ever, ever seen or heard of or tasted before? The only way that you can create the future is to use the past. You cannot create any type of a future without using any of the elements of what has gone on before us. All the future is trying to solve the solutions of the present or the past that we can't do right now. In other words, it's impossible to have a future without adequately and appropriately using what has gone before us. What happens if you forget what has gone before you? You have amnesia. You don't know how to create a future. You don't know what to do. You have to make stuff up on the spot. You use the immediate elements of the environment that is around you right now, and you say, oh, that's what we'll do because that's cool right now. And those who do that spin in circles and circles and circles. If you want to create an amazing future, a healthy future, a space, a society, or a country that is meaningful, then it has to be rooted in real history, not made up history. If Aotearoa is going to move forward and is actually is going to grow up and become a mature society where we can actually remedy having shared conversations, we have to know where we've come from. And this is on. So when we might say, forget about the past, it's impossible. Your parents and your grandparents live inside of you. That's what your DNA is. That's what your double helix are. They are not yours. You are actually the embodiment of 2 generations of love. Now, I showed you guys this the other week, on week 1. Which is the odd one out? Right, up the top, which is the odd one out? Right, naturally we go the little one. Right, but Indigenous people all around the world, as we talked about on week 1, say, this one's the odd one out. Because the middle one is a child, and the other 2 are mum and dad. It belongs to mum and dad, making the right an uncle. So the uncle's the odd one out. This diagram highlights that we have been trained to think. And by the training of our thinking comes from cultural norms and cultural perspectives that aren't wrong, it's just that there are other ones. And the future of New Zealand is about all of our ways of thinking, not just this way of thinking, that small one's the odd one out, about coming together and making decisions for our community and our future. Now we close with our prophet. Tohu kākahi. Right? Ka noho tahi te ruru me te neru, te kiore me te kārearea. Ko tahi tanga te rihi e tau ai rā. The owl, the cat, the rat, and the falcon will sit down together and eat from the same dish. This was a vision of our leaders of Parihaka, our leaders of Taranaki in their day, who said one day it'll come about when all of this diversity will sit down and they will share kai together. I've told you the story in week 1. This wari, this house, is shaped as a kono. A food basket to feed the people with kai, to feed the people with peace. Eating bread is a symbol of peace. When you walk in this door, you walk under te matarau kura, te matarau o rongo, the many faces of rongo, the many faces of peace. When the soldiers came to Parihaka, and as I mentioned on the first night, our rangatahi, our children, fed them with bread because it was a symbol of peace. Now, in closing tonight, you don't have to, but I'd like to invite you to leave here tonight by taking a piece of bread. Bobby and Raya, can you come in? Can you guys take a handle each? Take that down the back there. Indy, can you come and grab the tepu? Haidamai, and put the tepu down the back there. So we're going to close with a waita, and then I'll close with a karakia. And then as you walk out tonight, partake in rongo. Partake in peace. Partake in that over these weeks. We've been talking about kia ora ha koutou te tehi ki te, that you would love one another. How do you agree and disagree in love? This is what these 4 weeks have been on about. As you leave tonight, let me say my deep thanks to our team. Thank you, Erin, for all the administration you've done. Thank you, Dan. Thank you to all of our jerkin carriers down there, our wardens. To the whānau over in the vicarage, tēnā te mihi kia koutou. Ka aroha kia koutou e kaori e tainga i noho mai ki tēnei wari, engari kei te mihi kia koutou. I want to thank you, the people that have come and been in our overflow. And to our guests tonight, Debbie, to Glenn, to David. I instantly had you three in mind for this kōrero tonight, because when I see the candidates of your calibre, of all your three different persuasions standing in our rohe of Taranaki, it actually gives me hope. You three represent hope. You represent hope to us. I pray that the two of you who win, who get in some way, maybe it could be three, that I don't know. But if you know, for whoever you gets in, then you better do us well, and you better honour Te Tiriti. If you don't, be the best opposition on our behalf, not your party's behalf. I pray and I hope that you would be the best opposition to one another in love, as the tohu of our maunga, as representation of that. So I thank you three, for coming tonight. And Creator be with you, your tupuna be with you as you stand over these next few weeks. Finally, to everyone else, thank you so much for coming out. I would say 95% of you have been here all 4 weeks. Nō reira, ka nui te mihi kia koutou. It is a privilege for us to be able to host this for you. The only way that we can remedy this is by doing this regularly. So we will let you know when we will regather here and do a similar kōrero, to be able to talk about these things together. So nō reira, e te whānau, kei te mihi kia koutou. Iho.
Kai te ko mako e ko ki mai ki aho he aha te mea nui he aha te mea nui o te ao maku e ki atu he tangata he tangata he tangata he.
Kua wāte, rire rere hau, pai mārere. Thank you everybody, thank you for an amazing 4 weeks. Please have some bread as you walk out.